Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. All right. We're live. What's up, everyone? And welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Allan Young. Allan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is gonna be fun. I think I was on your first or second. I was on one of your first.
You were for sure in the top three, maybe number two. Dave Pasgan was my first. Sorry,
understandable.
To burst your bubble there, but Pasgan was the first. He's been back on, since then, and so this is your second time on as well. And I just appreciate you guys making the time to be on my podcast when I didn't know what I was doing and nobody was listening to it.
Well, that's fine. That's the fun part. There's no pressure. We could just hang out and talk.
That's right. Yeah,
now there's exactly. A lot of pressure. You got a couple million people watching this.
I don't know about a couple million, but it's more than just my mom now. I know that much.
Well, you've done really well. It's been fun to watch the progress.
Yeah, it's fun. You get to talk to a lot of cool people, and it's always funny because like you and I know each other, right? So if I reach out to you and like, hey, do you have 30 minutes to talk? You're probably going to find 30 minutes for me. But I've had so many people that I didn't previously know on the podcast. And like, had I just reached out to them and be like, hey, do you want to get on a Zoom call with me for 60 minutes? They've been like, no, weirdo. Like, I don't know you. But if you're like, hey, do you want to get on a podcast with me for 60 minutes? They're all about it. So it definitely makes it easier to connect with some folks that you're interested in talking to, I think, which has been fun. But so when you came on the first time, you were kind of in between things at that point. I should have gone back and listened to that episode, but I think we just talked a little bit about some of your background. You've got a lot of entrepreneurial experience at this point. We talked about how, you like to kind of come in and find ways to disrupt industries that have kind of been stagnant or haven't grown a whole lot. So you're kind of doing that again. What you've really been working on for the last, 3 or 4 years is building out this franchise company, Art of Drawers. So give us a quick overview. What is Art of Drawers? And then, we'll make sure the audience understands a little bit of your background and how you got to the point of building this company.
Yeah. So, Art of Drawers, and we'll talk about Shelf Genie, very similar. We do custom pull-out shelving for kitchen cabinets, pantries, bathroom cabinets. And, really we're giving people more space, better access. We're organizing everything, which has been really interesting. The pandemic, that was the gift the pandemic gave us, was organizing became cool and exciting. Yeah. And everybody's into it versus pre-pandemic. Not so much. They were thinking hoarders and, I don't need to be organized. So, that was a great gift that we got from the pandemic. But, we do what closet companies do. We just do it in the kitchen, and we're doing it with custom wooden pull-out shelving built down to the millimeter, which is really hard to do. And I think that's something that, from Shelf Genie to hear, I think both companies and that disruption you talked about, most of it comes from, or a lot of it comes from technology and using technology. I think, everybody's really should be a technology company that happens to do whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
So really focused on that. And it's been really fun to see AI come out. I think it's gonna be the same thing 3 or 4 years from now. If you're not using AI in a very serious way, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, totally agree. And I want to revisit that with you at some point in this conversation. But so for those that listen to the show, Shelf Genie comes up pretty often. They all know that my wife and I are Shelf Genie franchisees.
Number one, right?
Well, depends on how you look at it. If my wife were here, she would very quickly point out that we're number one in revenue per territory and have been for a very long time. And that's her business. I can't take any credit for any success that we've had with that. You know that's true. But it's been almost 6.5 years, if you can believe it, that we've owned our Shelf Genie franchise. And that all came about because you were, one of the founders of Shelf Genie back in what, early 2000s, 2005, 2006 is when it kind of started.
We started franchising in the fall of 2008, which was
Yeah.
terrifying and turned out to be incredible. We were an Inc. 500 company the next 3 years, Entrepreneur 500, because the pandemic or the Great Recession was a gift as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how these, some of these really big downturns can have such a positive impact for a lot of businesses. Obviously, it can be devastating for many businesses too, depending on the type of business. But you shouldn't just assume that a downturn is automatically going to be bad for any business.
I, yeah, I think it's devastating for the companies that aren't ready for it, that are kind of just fat and happy and not doing, what they need to be doing to innovate. And I think the younger companies, if you're a startup, you're going to do really well because that's the only environment we ever knew.
Mhm.
We essentially were born as a franchise into the Great Recession. So that's what we knew. And we're, young and nimble as a company.
Yeah.
And I think you can be a large company, but if you can't innovate, if you can't, if you've got a battleship you can't turn very quickly, that's where you get into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think being young and able to a younger company and being able to maneuver quickly is good regardless, but especially in tough times. Um, so so you're building out the Shelf Genie business, started franchising it in 2008. You were crazy enough in, I think, 2016 or 2017 to hire me to come do franchise sales and development. Just
You were a tough hire, by the way. I remember talking on the phone for like on vacation for like 2 or 3 hours, trying to convince you to come work for us because you were going somewhere else. So
Yeah, well, look, man, that's one of those things where I think I was coming from a place of fear. And I'd accepted this other job that, I think there was more guaranteed pay, right? But
100%.
not nearly as much upside. And so, yeah, we had some back and forth. Kelly and I talk about this pretty often, actually, man. Like, um, how fortunate we feel that things went the way they did, and that I went the Shelf Genie. I mean, it in the franchising side of things, like it kept me in a world of franchising where I was able to build a lot of relationships that have been really instrumental going forward, including relationships with people at Franchoice, which is where I'm a consultant now. And then obviously it opened the door for us to become franchisees ourselves, which was a catalyst for so many other things. Who
And that was
knows?
a risk with a lot of fear. I remember talking you through that and considering it. I mean, anytime you can have someone that's selling your franchise that also is a franchisee, it's a big plus for everybody. But that was a big risk. You had a lot going on, and
Yeah,
you're younger in your career, so I think you took that fear and turned it into action. I think that's ultimately what that fear, and you're dealing with a lot of candidates, but it's not just buying a franchise; it's making a big move in
yeah,
your career. And my whole thing is, if you're really afraid of doing it, you should probably do it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. If it scares you, you should at least pay attention more closely, right? Because that means you're on the verge of doing something that's going to take you way out of your comfort zone, and that's the only time you're leveling up is if you're out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and if you're really afraid, that means you're really considering doing it. If it's something that's sort of a passing
Yeah,
thought and you're not afraid, then like it's exciting and it's fun. But the more you get closer to actually doing it and deciding to do it, the fear just kind of builds. And I heard somebody talked about going on a skydiving trip, and they happened to be in Dubai at the time, and they're out drinking the night before, and everybody's like, "Let's go skydiving tomorrow," and it's like, "Great," and then he woke up the next morning. He's like, "Did I just say I was going to go skydiving?" And there's a little bit of fear. And then he's riding in the bus to go there, and the fear builds. And putting on all this stuff and getting briefed, like the fear goes up and up and up. And it's interesting. The fear builds to a crescendo at the point in time where you're getting ready to jump out of the plane. And then, if you've ever gone skydiving, this is, I think, very true. Once you jump out, the fear is pretty much gone. You're
Yeah.
falling. It's not terrifying falling. It's the point of, of maximum fear is when you're still extremely safe. And then the fear goes away when you're unsafe.
We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode. It's a really good way of looking at it. It's so true. It's so
And you're
true.
around when we took all the Shelf Genie employees and
No,
pushed.
I think that was before I had joined the company. But still can't get that vision of Andy Pittman with his jowls flapping in the wind out of my head. But no, I remember you guys doing it. We used to share, a video of it, I think at when we did Discovery Day and had candidates come in. But yeah, it's one of those things, man, where it's like you can look back at certain events in your life and be like, that happened for a reason. Like you guys just invited Kelly and I to drive to your conference in Atlanta. You hadn't even offered me a job at that point, I don't think. But you're like, hey, just come down, meet us, see what we're about. Obviously, I'm sure you were, wanting to do the same with me, but it was one of those things Kelly and I kind of talked about it. And we're like, yeah, I don't know, gotta get someone to watch the baby. And then we were just like, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. Like, what do we have to lose? And then it was a no brainer, after we had done that and, gotten to hang out with everyone for a couple days and see what the company was all about. So, but I think about it from time to time, like how would things be different if I would have gone with what at the time seemed like that safer option?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's really, it's probably it's not going to change your trajectory. And even if it doesn't work out, I look back on all the failures I ever had, the things that I did that didn't work out. And then you keep, drawing that line to what happened after that and what came of that decision and that failure. And it always leads to something better every single time.
Yeah.
And I challenge everybody to think about that big decision you made, whether it worked out or it didn't. What happened after that? What happened after that? And ultimately, if you trace it all out, it's always something good. So take the risk.
Yeah. And it's also not usually nearly as difficult to get back to even. Like if you take that risk and it doesn't work out, I think most of the time we kind of let our imaginations run wild with like how bad it's going to get if things don't work out. And really, it's not that hard to get back to where you are today. Like you've probably seen Tim Ferriss. He does this. He did a TED talk a long time ago with this fear setting exercise that he talks about. But like that's part of it is like, all right, what's the big scary decision? What could it actually look like if it goes wrong? Not like
What are all the worst things that could possibly happen, and how do you mitigate them? And we did
what
that.
can you do to prevent it from happening? And then even if they happen, what can you do to get back to where you are today? And if you seriously go through that exercise, most of the time you're going to realize like, okay, this is not nearly as scary as my mind was kind of leading me to believe that it was.
It happens all the time. It happens a lot in sales, pretty much every day. And I remember when I did a lot of in-home sales, one of my earlier businesses, and I did pretty well in selling. And then every now and then you don't sell one, and you don't sell one after that. And you get to 3 or 4, and all of a sudden, in an instant, your mind goes, "What if I never sell anything ever again? I'm living on this, I'm homeless. My family's left me." Your mind goes to that in like 0.3 seconds. And the reality is, if you list out all the worst things going to happen, you're not going to keep doing that thing until you're broke and living on the street.
Yeah.
You're going to stop doing it. You're going to adjust. And, we learn risk mitigation in the military. It's very similar to what Tim Ferriss talks about, because we would do some risky things. And based on how risky it was, we had to assess it. And then we had to mitigate those risks so we could do it. And a lot of that mitigation is, planning out, here's the worst that could happen. Here's catastrophic. And what are the steps it would take? I think it takes over 30 mistakes to crash a plane, like in a row. I don't know what the number is, but Malcolm Gladwell did that exercise. It's multiple times, and you have to keep going down that road and making mistakes. And all it takes is disrupting that chain of events and stopping to make sure you don't get all the way down that road.
That's interesting. Yeah. Um, I hadn't heard that one. I'll have to find where he talks about that. That's a really good example. So you mentioned so that's where you and I met was when I came to work at Shelf Genie, and then year and a half into that, I think, is when Kelly and I became franchisees. And walk us through a little bit. I mean, we don't have to get too into the details, but what kind of led to um you so you were the CEO at Shelf Genie when I got hired. Then you stepped down as the CEO, and then what, in 2020, Shelf Genie got acquired by Neighborly, which is this big conglomerate, or what I always refer to as a parent company. I think now they
Right.
have like 23 or 24 franchise companies in the US alone
No
that
one
are
even
all
knows.
in the home service
If you
space.
ask Neighborly how many brands you have, they're like they get the same thing, like 22, 23. That's
Yeah, they don't even know.
right.
Well, and like some of them are in the the UK and Europe, but not in the US. Some are in the US and also international. I think the total number is in the high 20s, like closer to 30, but I want to say it's like 22 to 24 in the US. But they're big. They're a big organization at this point. And they've grown to that size through acquiring up and coming franchise brands that have gotten to a place where they're big enough, they're established enough. It's not a startup or what most would consider an emerging brand at that point. That's not really Neighborly's model. They want to get something that's already solid enough, and then they can just, in theory at least, plug them into this system that they've built and grow it from there. Um, so you guys were able to build Shelf Genie to the point where it was attractive to a company like Neighborly that has done this many times and is at a place where they can be very selective about the types of brands they would even consider
Right.
acquiring. So that happened in, it was 2020, right?
Yeah. Fall of 20. Yeah. The deal was supposed to close end of March. So that got canceled 2 weeks, before that when the pandemic hit. So,
Oh, yeah.
but, and it was postponed. And I think everybody talk about fear. Everybody's thinking the sky's falling. We, just almost sold our company. When are we ever going to be able to do that again? And then it was the fall when it happened. It
Yeah.
actually happened, I think, a day before my paragliding accident. When I actually signed the DocuSign in the hospital right after I broke my back and was paralyzed. So,
You're
uh,
like, yes, I got some bills to pay now. Let's
yep.
let's sign these documents. But so walk us through a little bit of that transition from stepping down from CEO to then the time that passed until the acquisition happened, and then really launching Art of Drawers and beginning to franchise it.
Yeah, and as you know, and you're a big part of this, Shelf Genie grew very rapidly. The first 3 years at the pandemic, Inc. 500 company, and then 2016, it happened so slowly. I think a lot of things happen so slowly you don't realize it's happening. But I remember a very clear moment in 2016. I was at a conference and I rolled out a new technology platform. It was 5-star. That measures the behaviors that lead to good results and people get ranked on it, socializes it. And it's one of those ideas that I thought was great. And then I launched it and no one did it, except for one person, Michael Saunders. I know he came
Yeah.
up to me right afterwards. He goes, I'm going back to my team. We're just going to lean into this and do it 100%. And he was not on the top of the group, like, at all. But he became top of the group. And it was great a year later to show the trajectory of his metrics versus the system metrics, and he just blew it out of the water.
Yeah.
But no one else was looking at it. And I remember the top performing franchisees, typically they're the ones that don't want to change sometimes the most, because why bother? Because I'm doing so well, I'm on top.
Yeah.
And they're like, this doesn't work clearly, because here's this guy that, he's 5-star almost out of the gate, because you get points for doing the behaviors we know lead to good results, but there's a lag, and there's not that instant gratification that we're all used to now. But he just kept at it and kept those behaviors that led to good results, and did them over and over again, did the repetition. But that's when I started to get really frustrated. I realized that our ability to innovate with, however many, 1,000+ people in the field, whatever the number is, it was a lot, 250 locations, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
So, we just couldn't innovate. It took forever, whether it's a technology thing or even just a new product that we want to roll out, just would take forever. And that's when I got the idea of Art of Drawers. And originally it was kind of a hack for how do I get around this problem. So let's start a second brand. I looked at, Toyota is a good example. They were one
Yeah.
of the first to do this. They came out with Lexus, and it's the same car. They just branded it better. They made a better experience, and they upgraded some of the components.
Yeah.
So, that was kind of my idea. But the idea was to do what Toyota did, which is award the Lexus dealerships to the top performing Toyota dealerships that could. And that was my idea. The ones that could innovate, that really wanted to get on that bus to do it.
Hmm.
And I was going to use 5-star, really the ones that were leaning into the behaviors, to do it, to say, if you do this, then you get that. And then, my partners wanted to sell the company. This was probably around early 2017. That topic came up. And whenever you have, and we had a couple investors as well, that's who you're working for. The people that own the company is, I was the largest shareholder, but my job that I got paid for was CEO of the company. And my job was to give a return to my investors. You want to do
Yeah.
that
Sure.
in a responsible way. And they've been on the bus for, a decade at that point or
Right.
more. And, there comes a time where if they all want to sell and they all want to, move on to other things, you have to consider that. And it's been a couple years of that coming up as a topic. So, I agreed to step down because I couldn't sell the company. I didn't want to sell the company. There's a reason why people buy you. It's because they figured out they buy you at a certain price that they can make money long term.
Yeah.
But you made the decision to agree to sell Shelf Genie, but I couldn't go do that because I didn't want to do it. So you can't lead a sales process.
Yeah. You
If
got like a conflict of interest right
Yeah,
there.
you don't want to do it. You're not excited about it. I can sell anything I'm excited about that I believe in, but I wasn't excited about selling the company. So I stepped down, let them do that process. And really, I wanted to keep Art of Drawers, and I wanted to keep the $5 million technology package that we developed that really runs the business. And Shelf Genie got to keep that when we sold it, as a license. But I think that technology package is really, what allows Art of Drawers, and then now an industry that we're building, to emerge.
So what's the technology package you're referring to? That was built for Art of Drawers or built for both
No,
Shelf
so
Genie and Art of Drawers?
Shelf Genie. So we started, very early on,
Is it
and
Wish Portal that you're talking about?
yep,
Yeah.
and
Okay. Okay.
Canvas and Art of Drawers. So, but the same technology platform that I really started building in 2007 before we franchised, and kept customizing, kept building it, because as you know, what we do is really complex. And the reason we don't have an industry is because they don't have the software. You have to have the software to do what we do, both Shelf Genie and Art of Drawers, at scale. Because, really we're pricing, we have almost infinite SKUs where, you look at by the millimeter, width, depth, height, different wood types, rail types, scoop, slope. Like, it gets almost infinite SKUs. And to be able to price on the spot and stick the landing on cost of goods plus or minus 1%,
Yeah.
is a really difficult thing to do. And then once you get the order, how do you get those measurements efficiently? How do you put those into a system that go to the manufacturing, partners, the manufacturer, to, custom build, ship, manage the entire process. And then all the other extra CRM things we built into it. But you can't do what we do, what Shelf Genie Art Drawers does, without the software. The only way you could do it is start from doing it pen and paper, which we did for a couple of years as we were building out the platform, and slowly automate.
Yeah.
And so spend 5 to 10 years doing it, and $5 million on top of that. you could
Well,
get to this technology, but no one's going to do that in my estimation. It's too hard of a road to go down from, hey, let's plan to do this kind of thing. It just happened organically for us.
yeah, and it's the type of business, I mean, largely because of the level of customization. So, you get this almost infinite number of SKUs. You're not going to
Right.
be able to find like an off the shelf software that you can then kind of modify to do what you want to do. Like we owned an insulation franchise, which is not nearly as, custom as like Shelf Genie is. I mean, we're selling, there's only but so many types of insulation. It's really kind of a commodity. We had an off the shelf software that was then, kind of at the franchisor level modified specific to our business. And like that still wasn't great at all. It was better than having nothing, but it wasn't great. But, Shelf Genie's Art of Drawers is so much more precise and custom. Like you need to build your own software from the ground up, which
Yeah.
my head spins just, hearing you talk about it high level, like some of what you guys had to figure out on the
Yeah, and
backside of it.
when you say you're a technology company, you really, if you're going to do that, you have to invest heavily in technology and continue to do that. We're still spending $20,000 to $30,000 a month in some months developing the software, adding AI into it. It's never going to stop. First 5 years, I'm like, at some point we'll get to where it's built, and it never is completely built. You just keep investing in it, and that's how you become a technology company that happens to do whatever it is. In our case, custom pull-out shelving, but that automation is what allows us to scale and grow and take all that off the plate. Shelf Genie franchisee is very similar. Takes all the operational things off the plate so you can focus on growing and building your company.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does that when it's used right. I will say, Wish Portal, there's and again, it was interesting for us coming into the second franchise that we bought, uh helped us realize there were a lot of things with Shelf Genie that I think we kind of took for granted. That then all of a sudden, when those same things are not there or available to you in this other business, you're like, oh wow. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, even like some of the dashboards and stuff that you have in Wish Portal, like just quickly, easily being able to pull up reports and see where you're at, see how you rank against the other
yeah,
franchisees in the system. Like, there's so much that like looking back on it, we took for granted with Shelf Genie for years, and then you get into this other business that, in a lot of ways, should be a simpler business to operate than something like Shelf Genie wasn't the case.
yeah. And I lived that as well. During the pandemic, I got a little bit bored, and I bought three home service franchises with some other partners. And we were doing the owner operator thing, hiring managers to do it. But one of the things that shocked me, that shouldn't have shocked me, it's there in almost every business, is gross margin. You have hourly employees that go out to do these things, and in the beginning, it's certainly possible. I just never considered it as a possibility that we had negative gross margin, which means we were getting less revenue than we were paying the guys to go out and do it because they're driving all over the place.
Yep.
But even when we got positive net margin in those models, and we're doing pool cleaning, carpet cleaning, home cleaning, and in all those models, you have to have 60-70% gross margin. Plus, you have to have a fair amount of revenue because you have this thing called overhead. And in Shelf Genie and our drawers, we don't have either one. Our gross margin is locked in, and our overhead is so small you can count it usually on a couple of fingers.
Yeah, and so the gross margin's locked in because your cost of goods is going to stay within a 1 or 2% range of your total revenue as a percentage, and your salespeople and your installers are paid on a commission only basis. They're paid a percentage of whatever they sell or whatever they install, and so that keeps that margin erosion from happening. Because if someone, if an installer decides to take a 2-hour lunch break in the middle of an install,
That's his
I
call.
mean, he's getting paid the same regardless, right? So he's just decreasing what he's making per hour.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
I'm
think
curious.
you can attract more talent that way. As you've got installers that, you attract people that want to be able to excel and do better and get paid more based on their performance. So it's performance based. And when you have a performance based model, both commission only salespeople and also installers, you attract people who believe in themselves,
Yeah.
that know they can do it and
They
appreciate.
think like an owner.
Yeah, and they are owners. That's they're typically
Yep.
we refer to them as partners.
Yep.
They do have their own business that they work with us on.
Yep. Yep. And you have to like, and we learned this from you and from Andy, like you have to tee the opportunity up right.
Yeah,
And the right people are going to be attracted to it. The wrong people are going to run from it because they're like, what do you mean I have to drive my own truck? What do you mean I don't get reimbursed for mileage? I have to go to training and that's going to cost me some money.
yeah, and pay for training. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But it's a business, and that's what we learned to do with our installers is, you're running your own business. In any business, you're going to have startup costs and you're going to have operating costs. So these are pretty low in this case, with this business. They're pretty nominal compared to most other businesses you could go out and look at starting. And here's the type of revenue potential that you can have. And yeah, you're going to have some expenses in order to generate that revenue. You're going to have to drive to the job a couple times, which is going to cost you gas. It's going to take you time. You're going to have to, buy some tools if you don't already have them. Nothing crazy, but you have to buy some tools. You have to buy
yeah,
some screws. That's your cost of goods to do what you're going to do. And when you get the right people that get that, like we've missed on a few installers that we've hired, but they're ones that looking back on it, like we wouldn't make that same mistake again. We wouldn't even offer them the opportunity. The ones that we've hired and have been good, I think they've all been with us for at least 4 years now.
yeah. And I bet you did what we did as well in our corporate markets, is you probably cheated on those a little bit, where you offered to pay for the training or you put some money
A
up
little
front
bit,
for.
yeah. Yeah, I think like what Kelly's done is, how has she done it? Maybe a little bit differently in a few instances, but I don't think she's ever outright paid for something. She's paid for it up front, and then she's held portions of that out of future commission checks. And I think
Yeah,
one time that burned us because the guy like literally quit during training. He never came back and did
yeah,
any installs, so there was nothing to hold out of his commission. But for the most part, that's worked good. And like the first installer we hired is still with us. He worked for me at a previous company as an installer, and so that's the first person I reached out to when we decided we were gonna become Shelf Genie franchisees. He came to the installer portion of the training when I was there going through it as a new franchisee. And he's a firefighter, right? Which has
right.
been really good for us. We've had a couple firefighters. We have a state trooper.
We've got an actor, and he's a pretty serious actor. I could list out a couple things he's been in,
Oh,
and
really?
but in between acting gigs, what's he going to do? He's got a small handyman business. And he does a lot of work for us, and he's fantastic.
Interesting.
You can imagine with customers, interacts with them extremely well. So you can tap into some amazing talent. Like we've
Yeah.
got an installer that runs a $28 million furniture store, but he's off on Mondays and Tuesdays, and he doesn't like to be bored. So he does, you do installs during that time.
And that's, for him, it's probably not about the money at all, but they can still make some pretty nice play money, fun
Yeah,
money.
they're making 40 to 60 an hour typically. That's been my experience. And what's interesting is you could go out and pay somebody $20 an hour, but
Yeah.
you're getting turnover, and turnover is so costly. You save money by paying this 40 to 60 an hour with people
You
that
save
aren't.
time. You save time too, right? Because these people that are going to be good in these roles, like I said earlier, they think like owners. So you spend so much less time having to manage the install side of your business, which frees you up to go focus on all the other things the owner should be doing, most of which involve driving more revenue. So it works really well. So like, here's something I've kind of wondered, and I'd love your take on it because you've seen so many other franchises in kind of the same home service category. Like why do more brands or just more companies not use that same model? Like you see it in painting, roofing, fencing. I'd say it's pretty common to outsource the install.
Yeah.
But you don't really, I don't really see hardly any other concepts doing the commission only sells.
Yeah, they can't. And it's possible, but it's so hard because they didn't start with it. If you're paying hourly and you're one of my hourly employees, and I go out and bring somebody or try to convince somebody to come in and get a percentage and pay for training, they're gonna see you out of the gate, and you're getting guaranteed money. So it's really hard, and you're gonna see them coming, going, wait a minute. It kind of blows up the model, and it's very disruptive in a way that it's hard to get through. So you have to really be willing to commit to that if you're making that shift. It's the same thing on franchising. As you know, we have a sales support center that handles all the inbound calls, schedules all the appointments, and they get charged for that. But that's one thing you don't have to worry about. It's another thing that's taken off your plate. But I've known brands that tried to. In fact, Dave Paskin's one of them. He tried to
Yeah.
put in a call center after he'd built a home services company,
Yeah.
and
So
at that
much
point,
harder.
people like none of the franchise partners really want to do it because they had their sister-in-law answering the phone or something, or they were doing it and it was free, although they're losing a lot of money because they're not answering the phone and doing it well.
Yeah.
But anything you do after the fact, and we sold Shelf Genie, we sell our drawers on the fact that we have these things that you have installers and
Yeah.
you pay a percentage. So I think it's really hard to pivot. Same thing with culture. I try to put in values and a culture in Shelf Genie in 2014 or 15. I hired a coach and I had a CEO coach. He's like my second or third one. And he goes, what are your values? I'm like, I don't know, work hard, get stuff done. This was early on in the,
Grit.
everybody has values now. Yeah. But it made sense to have values in a culture. I just didn't have one. So we came up with them. And I can tell you, implementing a culture is probably the hardest thing you can do, especially if you have, you know, 50 plus people.
Yeah.
Come
So
on
hard
with.
to go back and implement all that. I mean, you have to kind of turn everything over. You got to have
Well,
it in place
yeah,
to. All
we
right.
had 90
So
turnover.
so my
The,
takeaway there is, if Kelly and I ever franchise a business, we lead with the commission only sells deal, and then it has a higher likelihood of working.
yep. Yeah, you start with it. Anything you're going to change, and that's one of the problems with Shelf Genie I was alluding to. Making change was so hard to do because people are used to doing it. And as you know, like Shelf Genie sends out, I try to disrupt the supply chain. And that's what we did with our drawers because it was brand new and we just did it different where we don't put on the rails. Shelf Genie puts on the rails and ships it out because that's what we always did. But
Shelf
all that.
Genie manufacturing puts on the rails.
Right. And
Yeah.
even before when we had manufacturing partners, we always put on the rails because when I came into the company, when it was a 3 or 4 person operation in Richmond, pre-franchising, that's what we did because it was local and the installers would pick it up. But those rails scratch everything up. It's extra things the manufacturers that you want to partner with at least don't want to do. So we tried to get the installers just to put on the brackets in the field because it was going to save so much on damage and they wouldn't do it. I even did a video of me doing it and it took me less than a minute to do it. But no one wanted to change. It's like, why do that little bit extra when I can do what I'm doing now and get paid the
Yeah.
same?
Change is hard. It's hard. So I have a question for you, and we can cut this out if you don't want to answer it or don't want me to publish it. But I'm sitting here scratching my eye. We talked about Neighborly, right? These guys are huge. They've probably got an entire floor of attorneys that work for them. How the hell did you get away with not signing a non-compete when that acquisition closed?
Right. Well, as I told you before, I wasn't a big fan of selling the company. So when
Yeah,
I stepped down, I was out of the process. And one of the things that I brought up kind of early on was, let's talk about a non-compete because that's going to come up. And for whatever reason, the investment banker and the people involved in selling the company didn't think that was going to be a thing, even though I knew it was going to be a thing. And the other thing was I started Art of Drawers prior to the
right.
actual sale of the company.
Yeah,
Uh, and I remember I started it a month. I didn't know when the sale was happening. I was out of that process. That's something that typically is very, kept very confidential within the board and
yeah,
what they're doing. I was out of it. And I should have been because I was looking at starting Art of Drawers. Well, it had been a couple years. So I started it and I hired 3 people. I recruited them out of their jobs. As you know, that's my favorite thing to do is recruit people out of their jobs and pay them less than they're making before with a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
I've just done that, and three people had left their great jobs. And a month later, I got a call saying, "Hey, we're selling the company." I'm like, "That's great. Congratulations. I'll buy the first round of drinks." And then there's this pause, and and you need to sign a non-compete. And I just couldn't do it. I had just hired these three people to leave their jobs, and so I just said no. And there was no amount of money that they were putting out some numbers that will pay you this. And I think that was the assumption was you don't need to sign a non-compete, but I think the investment banker knew. I don't think our partners did, but he knew that was going to come up last minute, and he knew that's typically solved with money. But there wasn't any amount of money that I was going to pay to.
Would the money have come from more money from Neighborly or the other
Yeah,
Shelf Genie owners giving you a
yeah.
bigger cut to just sign the non-compete so they can close the deal?
Well, this was actually a deal that didn't happen a little bit before Neighborly. It was a private equity company.
Gotcha.
So that happened. I said, I'm not signing non compete. And then, with Neighborly, it was just kind of built in. I already had a competing company going. They knew that. And it wasn't hurting the business. I think that's where, when we started in Atlanta as a corporate market, the Shelf Genie franchisee in Atlanta, she was up 40% year over year her first 6 months competing against us. Like she's doing well. And that's what, I knew all along, but it's one of those people don't believe it till they see it moments
Yeah.
that our industry needs competitors. With Shelf Genie, there's a lot of Shelf Genie franchisees didn't have any competitors, and there was 7 of them that didn't have one that got one. And these are low cost, half price competitors that are difficult to deal with. They're ankle biters. But in all cases, all 7 of them, if you look at the next year, if you look at the data, they were up in close rate. All their metrics were up. They were doing better. But you wouldn't have known that talking to them. They weren't, it's an emotional thing, but they all did better in mine. And these were people that are not contributing to help build the industry and educate people in the industry. But nonetheless, if I put you on a track and say, run around as fast as you can, I'm going to time you, I'm going to get a time. Then I could take someone much older, clearly much slower, and say, race against this person. And you would run faster.
Yeah, you don't
Guaranteed.
want to get beat by the older, slower person than you.
So everybody, if you don't have competitors, you have a B game because you don't even know what your A game is. So, that's one effect. But what we're trying to do with Art of Drawers, we're allowing Art of Drawers franchisees to license this software we talked about to closet companies, countertop companies, refacing companies, to license it to build an industry. They're essentially excited about creating competitors because what we know is our industry is about $100 million, and most of that is Shelf Genie, Art of Drawers, and some guys in trucks. The closet industry is 60 billion. It's the same model. We're going into kitchens; they're going to closets. I would say that anybody that would spend $10,000 or $5,000 in a closet is our target demographic. Plus, as
Yeah.
you know, we have this demographic of people that wouldn't spend a penny on their closet. But they'll spend a lot of money. They're happy with their closet, but they'll spend a lot of money on their kitchen because they're
Yeah.
older. It's a big value. So we have a larger market, and we're doing 100 million, and the closet industry is doing 60 billion. The only way that happened was lots of people are doing it. Their cost per lead is less than $100. Ours is $500. 450. We're in that range, and our model affords us to do that. But think about if there's a lot of companies doing it, the awareness level, which is what we fight against every day. You do, all of our franchise partners do, and that's what we want to build is that entire industry. And it's really cool, and we did it up front to have franchise partners that are excited about creating essentially competitors.
Well,
They're
talk about an example of building it in at the beginning, right? Like, can you imagine how hard it would be to try to, you know, roll that out 2, 3 years after you started franchising Art of Drawers and you had franchisees that didn't originally buy into that concept?
it would never happen. I was so clear about that vision from day one with every franchise partner, and it resonated with everybody that came into Discovery Day. But if we had not talked about that, to your point, and I tried to do that with Shelf Genie, not, Art of Drawers was, hey, we don't have a competitor, so let's create our own competitor. That's been a play that companies have done for a while. But I used to stand up. I've always been a fan of competition, and I used to stand up at conferences. You probably heard me say, I hope if you don't have a competitor, I hope you get one. And I hope you get a lot of them. And I hope you get ones that are going to spend a lot of money on marketing that are not half price, because that's, if you're half price, you can't spend money on marketing. You have no budget.
That's
But
right.
I hope for that. And that's ultimately what I'm delivering. And we're going to get a lot more. And everybody's going to, that's, industries are not two companies, and some guys in trucks. Industries are hundreds of companies. And every time you go to an industry conference, that's what it is. And if there had only been one or two closet companies, you wouldn't probably know what a closet company was. You'd be like, what? People are spending that kind of money? And that's what
Right.
California Closets was getting in the beginning. So, starting from the beginning, and that's what I'm most excited about, is building an industry. I mean, how many opportunities do you get in your career to build an industry? It's
Yeah.
extremely rare, and everybody on our team is excited to do it. Our franchise partners are excited to do it. And I think Shelf Genie is going to see the net effect, and we're all going to get on board with, being the first two companies in an industry that's being built is really, really pretty cool.
We'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, it is. And I mean, when you compare it to the closet industry, it is kind of mind-boggling that, the pull out shelving industry. And I mean, like, it's very true what you say about, the fact that it's not an established industry or even a category makes it a lot harder to generate leads, through your marketing and advertising, especially digital, right? Anything that's relying on proactive searching, right? Like pay per click or SEO, it's hard because people don't even know. They might know that they don't love their kitchen cabinets and how easy it is to get to things. They don't know what to search. And even like, Angie, or not Angie's List. Yeah, I guess Angie's List and some of these types of places that you can advertise through, they've got different categories, right? Definitely have categories for custom closets, but if Shelf Genie or Art of Drawers reaches out to one of those types of companies and wants to advertise, there's not an option that really fits what that company does
Right.
in their different categories. So that's been difficult. Like, people think it's kind of funny when I'm like, yeah, we actually do direct mail advertising and it works, but it's because it's visual. People see it and it clicks with them. They're like, oh yes, that's what I need. What is that called? Pull out shelving. Okay, yeah,
Right.
that's what we need. We need pull out shelving. When they walk into a home show and see your exhibit, like, you
Once they
got
see it.
wives dragging their husbands, 10 miles an hour over to your booth to look at it, but you can't really rely on things like pay per click and SEO because people don't even know what to
Yeah.
search for.
Once they see it and they get it, have you ever met anybody that doesn't want it? I mean, that's what's
No.
pretty special about our category. Everybody looks at it and wants. It's just, how big of a priority is this? And have I heard about it before? I
Yeah.
think people, we're still in that early stage of, we have people, early adopters are the ones that are doing it. If you look at that scale of early adopters, and then there's ultimately market acceptance. I think that the fear with competition with us, and the fear always is with competition, is that it's going to become commoditized, or it's going to become saturated. And we are the closet industry is not saturated. You talk to them, they're paying less than 100 a lead. You've got 20, $30 million closet companies, which is like an average size closet company, that you ask them their marketing budget and they kind of go, what? We get so much work from just people finding us because it's a category. And so
Right.
we're light years away from being commoditized. We're never going to get there in my lifetime or any of our lifetimes. So let's grow the category. Instead of trying to get a bigger slice, when I look at Shelf Genie, I look at Shelf Genie as a sibling. That's a company that whenever we go into a home show and Shelf Genie's there, I introduce our franchise partner. I want us to build an industry together. So that's really the goal. But you look at our two companies as we're growing it, we're creating an industry and we're creating that brand awareness. And would you rather own 1% of Home Depot or 100% of a small hardware store?
Yeah.
And the closet, California Closets has a much smaller percentage of the industry. They start out with 100, but they are number one. They're still on top, and they do extremely well.
I
So,
mean, they have individual franchisees doing 20 million plus a year in revenue,
yeah,
like
and you really
individual.
have to have that growth mindset. It's the harvest mindset versus a famine mindset, and that idea of making the pie bigger and having a smaller percentage of the pie is always the way to go. But so many of us, it's just sort of natural for us to become extremely protective of what we do and hope that no one else is doing it, and to be, one of the few that does it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that growth mindset, harvest mindset, that's important. I mean, so many of the people that I work with looking at franchises, like it always comes up. Doesn't matter what franchise they're looking at, what industry they're in. They start, Googling around and they're like, wow, Wes, man, I don't know. There's a lot of companies already doing this, or a lot of competitors, in my market already. And so I'm like, okay, well, number one, it's a good sign. It means there's demand for it, right? If you found zero competitors of this business that you're contemplating getting into, that's scarier to me than seeing competitors, because that means probably no one's in the market for it.
Yeah,
Um, and also I think the other mistake is like assuming that every company that shows up in a Google search would be a comparable competitor. You talk a lot about technology, and I know we got to wrap this up soon, but I'd love to hear, some of your thoughts on how you guys are currently implementing AI, what you think that's going to look like in the future. But that's one of the biggest advantages that some of these really well structured franchise companies give to their new franchisees coming into a market is the technology, right? And the way that they're able to not only market the business and target the right types of people, but also communicate with those prospective clients and then existing clients. It's 2024, right? Like people want to be able to book an appointment through their phone. They want to be able to get automated updates and notifications as to the status of their order or whatever the case is. And a lot of these smaller companies that have maybe been around for 15, 20 years in a market, they're just not up to speed with all of that. And they're not operating in a way that's in line with how most consumers are wanting to conduct their business in this day and age. And so I have to do a lot of coaching around, like, yes, there's competitors. That's not the end of the world. There's so many things that are actually positive about that. But, the last thing you want to do when you're getting into a business is get into a business where the only way you're going to be able to compete is to be the lowest price. And
yeah,
so what you've really got to figure out is, okay, if I get into this franchise, what's the value proposition? How can we
yeah.
compete against some of these lower cost options and not have to just slash prices in order to win the business? And I think what most people find is that at least half, if not more, of the competitors that they would see in their market
Yeah.
are very unsophisticated, what we've always kind of called chuck in a truck type
Yeah.
competitors who will compete on price, and they're going to take all the customers that you don't want in the first
You don't
place.
want them. You don't want them. That's not your customer. And
No.
yeah, you can go into a saturated business industry, and I don't think there's that many out there in home services. And if your value proposition is better than everyone else's, you can charge more than everyone else, and you're going to do fine. It's all about what is that value proposition that you're giving. And the mosquito industry is a really like that industry is not saturated, really. If you look at the
But it looks like, but if you just quickly
look
did
at the
some
numbers,
research, it looks your takeaway, your first take's going to be, okay, that industry is saturated. There's so many of these companies out there.
it's not. It's not. And even if it was, you go in with a better value proposition, it's there's demand for it. So you go in and be better. And I think that's what people are scared about is what if I'm not better than everyone else?
Yeah.
We all have imposter syndrome, and that's the biggest fear is what if I can't go in and be better than these companies that have been doing it for a while. That's the ultimate fear that's driving that decision or that concern for going in or not going in.
Yeah. And let's be clear here, like not every company out there offering a franchise in an industry where you're going to have competitors is automatically going to actually have a better value proposition. So that's where you do have to do your research and do some good due diligence. You know, you want to partner with a company that genuinely has a good value proposition. But if you have that piece, you know, you shouldn't be overly concerned about the competition. And like Kelly and I have learned this over the years with Shelf Genie, the problem clients that we have are always exclusively the ones that try to haggle over price the most and that spend the bare minimum they can to kind of sort of almost get what they want done.
Right. Right.
And it's a very freeing feeling to get to the point in your business where number one, you start to recognize who those problem clients are,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just fire them and you tell them we don't need your business. That is such a good feeling.
That's right.
So, all right, real quick, and then we'll wrap this thing up. I want to hear if you're comfortable sharing AI. Every company out there, you know, I go to these franchise conferences, hundreds of brands there. AI is mentioned by every single one of them. My take is that many of these brands aren't really truly implementing AI. They're saying it because they know they need to be saying it. They know it's a buzzword, but they don't really know yet how AI is going to impact their industry, how they're going to incorporate it into their business. I know you're a techie. I know you've probably thought very long and very hard about this. Like, what are some of the things you guys are doing at Art of Drawers today to implement AI? And like, how do you think AI is going to impact, say, just the home service industry in general going forward?
Sure. Yeah, we're doing a couple things, and you're right. Like I talk to a lot of CEOs, and everybody's using AI because you have to say you are. But then when you dig into how are you using it, most CEOs, and I get interviewed for a book on AI, and I got this email. This is probably like 6 to 12 months ago. It was a while back, saying, I'm interviewing CEOs about AI. I'd love to interview. And my response back to him was, I'm probably not the guy. I haven't figured it out. We're trying to use it, but I'm not the guy that you want to interview about AI in a company back then. That wasn't too long ago. And he said, no, I want to interview you. That's what I'm doing, is I'm trying to figure out what CEOs are doing. And the small percentage of people are actually using it. Even the bigger companies that you would
Yeah.
think, they're not doing it because it's really hard to implement when you get big. But the things we're doing, we're going through and using it for decision making, for strategy. AI can do so much more than rewrite your email and make it better. If you know how to do the prompts, if you know how to set it up, I'll give you an example. That's not us, but a CPG company that I know was going into, and they're in Whole Foods, but they're going to go brief the CEO on why they need to, they should expand with them. They this whole presentation they spent months on, and they took that presentation and ran it through ChatGPT, and also brought in all the information that's out there on the CEO and how he thinks and what he believes. And it came back saying, this is good, this is good, this is good, but here's one of the most important things to the CEO, and you do it because it was uploaded everything they do, but you're not even talking about it in your brief, and it rewrote it, and they went in and blew the CEO out of the water. Like that's what it's really good at, and we've got everyone in our
It's a
company
little
using.
creepy. It's awesome, but it's a little creepy.
Yeah, it's just smarter. It's the smartest employee you can have, and our employees, our team are going to AI, to the smartest person we have on our team, and asking for that advice and asking for that help. And if you know how to put the inputs, it's going to give you a lot of great things for ideation. So it's very creative, but it also helps you do strategy and decision making. You can upload everything we had a problem with the vendor, and we were getting on the phone with them, and we uploaded the entire problem and said, what's the best way to approach this vendor to get to a resolution where we can continue with our partnership. And what it came out with was incredible. And we had an amazing call that would not have been amazing
When
had we not done it.
when you say you uploaded it, are you just primarily using Chat GPT?
Yeah. ChatGPT, we had the
So
paid version.
you just type out like, here's the issue, and then maybe import some supporting communications or documentations that have gone back and forth between you and this vendor, and it's able to kind of
Yep.
decipher all of that and say, here's the recommendation.
Yeah, and you set up the scenario and say this is what's going on, and these are the problems we're having. This is what they're doing for us, and this is where we're stuck on the problem. And here's the problem, and how would you best resolve this, given all the information we've given you? So the more inputs, the more information you give it. The other thing we're doing that's pretty cool is we're using it for sales training. So we have a trained AI that knows our entire sales process. It knows all of our scripts. It knows exactly how a sales appointment is supposed to go. And our designers can interact and actually do a live practice appointment with the AI. And the AI can either be the client, and it's incredible how interactive this thing is. You can talk through an
Yeah,
entire design appointment. And at the end, it gives them a score and it coaches them on what they could do better. And then they can take that information and give it to their franchise partner who can actually see where they're at and how they're doing. So you can also flip it around where they can, the AI can be the designer and you can go through and see what it would do. So that
that's cool.
that's
Can you program what type of customer the AI can be? Like a haggling customer versus a an easygoing customer, or because that could
yeah.
be fun. You could have some fun with that.
Yeah, you absolutely can. You can tell it to pick a persona and it'll pick one. You can say, by the way, I want this persona, this, and it'll say the name of the client, their age, their what they do for a living. Like it goes into great detail when it comes up with these random clients. And say, I want you to be really concerned about price at the end. I want you to say you need to think about it and talk to your spouse. Like you can throw in all the scenarios. I want you to be really difficult at the end. On a scale from 1 to 10, I want you to be an 8 difficult. You can interact with this and it's going to say, okay. And then it does it. We have a sales support center and we have employees working it. So if they're watching this, this is not a scary thing for them. But at some point, we're going to have them we're going to have AI answer the phone better and talk to a customer.
I got something I'm gonna send you after this. I'm talking to a company that's doing this sort of thing,
Yep.
and I've got a demo that I can share with you. It's pretty wild. And the demo is specifically for like the Shelf Genie business. So I'll I'll share that with you. I think I'd be curious your thoughts on it if you play around with it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. And, the conversation, one of our values is think like an entrepreneur, think big, act fast, be curious and innovate and grow or die. And because we have that, we've got a team that's going to actually help implement and probably, erase what they're doing today in the company. But because they know we're growing and scaling, we've brought in a culture of people that want to innovate and do things that would be considered, heresy in some companies, like how you're eliminating my job. How could you do that? But if you build it from the ground up, those innovations are coming, and every company's got to be ready to be completely disrupted. And if everybody on that team is not ready to, it's going to be a train wreck.
Yeah. Yep. Um, you have a book. Tell us about the book, and then we're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah. So the name of the book is Disruptible, and it really talks about all the things we're talking about. Is how to think differently, how to not be ordinary. I think it's funny that we call people extraordinary, and being normal, being ordinary. That's
Be like anti-ordinary or something like that.
right. Yeah. Just break away from the pack, do things differently. Embrace fear. One of our core values that we look at is embracing failure. Like we celebrate failure when we know why, and that's a really hard thing to do. We also, be vulnerable and asking for help. Being vulnerable in the workplace is a really hard thing to get people to do. But
Yeah.
it's really, it's extremely countercultural. But there's stories in there on how it works. I think you're around for a time where there was a number of people that needed to be let go from the company, but the leadership team didn't want to do it. And so I offered everybody on the team $5,000 to quit and 2 weeks pay. Everybody got that offer. And the leadership team was so, we went into my office. They didn't know I was going to do it. It's one of the surprise things. They're like, what if everybody quit and takes this money? And I'm like, then we know we have a problem. We'll have to solve for it. It'll be a big problem, but we already have it. We'll just know about it. And
Yeah.
guess how many people took it? Zero.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting move. But still haven't got my signed copy of the book. But
I will get it to you.
where can people go to check out the book if they want to do that? Where can people connect with you?
Yeah.
And where can people learn more about Art of Drawers?
Yeah. The book's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but you can go to allanyoung.com, ALLAN, allanyoung.com, and it's got the book on there and a little bit more about what we're doing. And, Art of Drawers, if you want to go to Art of Drawers, there's a franchising button. You can take a look at that.
Beautiful. Put those in the show links so everyone can find it. Ladies and gentlemen, Allan Young, thank you, man.
Thanks,
Good to have
Wes.
you on for round two.
Thanks a lot.